and welcome to the second edition of the State Support Team 9's podcast. This video podcast is featured in the April 2022 SST9 newsletter, along with an article entitled Education Collaboratives as Leaders for Sustainability, an Inspiring Ohio Story. This article was written with SST9 and ESC consultants, co-authored by Dr. Jon Saphier. My name is Julie Weyandt. I'm one of the consultants here at State Support Team 9. I am with Tom Nunziato, who is a consultant with Stark County ESC, and Candi Hazelwood, a former SST9 consultant. And they're going to be helping with our discussion today. So our topic is on making student thinking visible, or MSTV. We started the MSTV work in Region 9 in 2016 with the help of Stark Education Partnership. And we had a goal of strengthening instructional practice to improve academic success for all of our students. We are so excited to have Dr. Jon Saphier here with us today. He's the founder and president of Research for Better Teaching. He also created the MSTV online course that we use for our professional development. So welcome, Dr. Saphier. Could you tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
Well, thank you, Julie. First, I'm a person who's very happy to have worked in deep collaboration with you three. You three are not only the co-authors of that article, but really responsible for creating the infrastructure at the state level or at the regional level that made this project click. So for Julie and Tom and Candi, my thanks and my gratitude for being able to partner with you all these years. I was a classroom teacher for 10 years, then an instructional coach in the 70s, and then an administrator before starting RBT in 1979. And since then, that's almost 43 years now. We're still intact. We're all getting a little long of the tooth and gray of the hair, still committed to the work.
Awesome.
So that's a little bit about me. Great.
Well, thank you, Jon, and thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here with us today.
Pleasure.
So before we jump into our questions, Tom, would you be willing to share some historical information about MSTV in our region?
Yes, just so you have a general background of how MSTV has gone on in our area since 2016. We're actually just finishing up our 6th cohort in our coaching/networking, where we have had over 35 different educational entities, from state support teams to ESCs to local school districts and other consultants that have gone through this course. And every year we have the course as a cohort so that we're able to get together and work with each other. We're also closing in on almost 400 educators who have completed the course through those 6 cohorts. And it's really been an exciting situation, being able to see all these different people working from all these different regions, or districts actually, coming together. And a real interesting fact that when you break down the data, we actually have almost an even distribution between elementary, middle school, high school teachers, and administrators. So, you know, a lot of times when we do professional development, you sometimes see numbers fall in a certain category, but across these 6 years, we have found that the breakdown between educators, administrators at the different grade levels is pretty much even, which shows you the impact and the versatility of what we're talking about during these. So we're excited. We're already planning cohort 7, so that would be great to see.
Awesome. Thanks, Tom. So, Jon, we have several questions for you, and we would like to start out with this question. Can you please tell us what making student thinking visible is, and how the 24 operating principles were identified?
Well, let me start with my own history with it. You know, I spent my entire career at RBT trying to figure out as much as I can about what are the important things that teachers do. What is the knowledge base about skillful teaching? And every few years, we come out with a new edition of the book called The Skillful Teacher, in which we try and summarize all of that. Well, in the middle of, it's not the middle, almost the middle of this history in the 1990s, I got very interested in what was going on in District 2 in New York City. District 2, over that decade, went from below the middle to the highest performing district in the entire New York City, which, you know, they have 1 million kids. And so what I discovered in visiting them and starting to work with certain colleagues down there was that you could walk into any school, any grade level, any subject area, and you'd see the teachers doing these skills called making students thinking visible. And I got fascinated with learning them and with trying to break apart what it would take to get more and more of our fellow educators to learn about them. So I went in there like I don't know, like an ethnographer, I suppose. I wanted to know behaviorally what people were doing to carry out these skills and be able to name them, separate them, put them in categories, and then figure out what it took to learn how to do it. So I had to learn how to do it myself. It was a constellation of behaviors, and now I'm going to put up a graphic for you all to look at, which had a significant and really vital impact on student learning, student engagement, student participation in class. What I noticed was the teachers talked less than the kids did the majority of the talking. And they wouldn't just give one-word answers, they elaborated them with explanations of why they'd given them and spoke in full sentences. I also saw evidence, number 3, that the students were listening to one another. And then there were some things that had to do with classroom climate and how the kids treated one another. They were willing to openly admit confusion, ask for help, and challenge one another's thinking, number 4 and 5. The very first video that we show in the course is an 8th grade math class where the kids are doing that. You know, you don't see adolescents acting that way unless something has happened. And so in order to investigate that, I tried to see if they had some social emotional learning program going on, you know, go off into the woods before school starts for a week and do trust falls with the kids. No, none of that was happening. They were just doing what I was seeing in order to create that climate. And so these 4, 5, 6, and 7 were consequences, effects of using this constellation of skills that went above and beyond using certain talk moves. You know, I guess in addition to being an ethnographer, you could say I was an anthropologist because I wanted to know the history of how this had gotten started there. Lucy West, who is my partner on a lot of the video you see in the course, had gone to Lauren Resnick's think tank at the University of Pittsburgh and started by learning talk moves. You still hear the term accountable talk and talk moves, but this was far more than that. The kids were being taught norms. I won't go through these, but these are some norms of behavior that are an intimate, deliberate part of making students thinking visible that one teaches the kids to do. So I wound up, to answer your question, Julie, with 24 items that form this constellation. And the first 8 here are classically the kind of talk moves you hear about when people talk about accountable talk, but number 9 through 17 are not. Those are quite different kinds of things. And that kids learn active listening by being asked to revoice what a previous kid have said. Number 10 and 11 there is above and beyond the talk moves of accountable talk. And there were also 14 through 17 things that I had to do to change my pattern as a teacher. You know, teachers who are active and energetic and like to do the majority of the talking have to stuff that You know, you have to learn to be much more restrained. And also, number 15, this was long before the current era where you hear productive struggle surfaced as an element of good teaching. In order to do this, one has to restrain oneself from jumping in when a kid is confused and instead do some of the things down here in the 18 through 22 area or up in the top move, you know, like I'm saying, Candi, I understand this is kind of difficult. So Julie, take a crack at it. How did you approach it? Now, I knew exactly what was wrong because I'd seen this many times before in the thing that Candi couldn't identify, but I tried to get the kids involved in talking to each other about it. So what you see on this slide here is a number of themes, all of which are deliberately worked on with the skills, those 24 things of making students thinking visible. And one of them is the step number one is to start with a question that's going to stimulate high-level thinking. Now, of course, you get everybody engaged, nobody can opt out. And there is a great deal around these two characteristics here, classroom climate and social emotional learning, that were in those two lists I had up a minute ago. So all of that is what motivated me to really learn how to do this and put it into some sort of a format that I could share with other folks. So let me see if I can stop sharing now and get back to you all.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. That is so inspiring, just the whole process of putting those 24 operating principles in place, but really observing what the change in the behaviors of the students within the classroom. So thank you for sharing that with us. And at this time, Candi, go ahead and ask your question.
Thanks, Julie. John, it's so good to see you. So in our article, we talk about the benefit of using collaborative structures, such as the district and building leadership teams. And when setting up the MSTV cohorts, we also ask building teams to register for the course, with those teams including an administrator and a teacher. These teams could then provide the leadership for the building, hopefully to keep the process improving. There are many other components that should be a part of a system to strengthen high expectations teaching and getting students to believe in themselves through effort-based ability training. Can you just talk about how to get the skills into the classrooms at all levels, at all grade levels in every building and hopefully through the district?
Right. Well, you named one of them right there, Candi. Amongst the many things I've learned from being a staff developer over the years is that no matter how good the workshop is, nothing's going to take and nothing's going to stick if participants just go to a workshop and walk out, even if they liked it, even if they think, oh man, that was good. So one has to build in a way to follow up. And the first thing is what you mentioned. One tries to get a team from a school so people can do things either in between sessions or after the sessions are over with each other. And it's much more likely they will if their administrator was along with them, somebody whom those folks can ask to provide the time or the format for doing that. But there are other things that can be very, very powerful too. First of all was one that you all did. You brought people together from all the cohorts once or twice a year into a common setting where either one of us was there to provide new input, new bells and whistles to go with it, testimony or videos from other parts of the country where people were using this, and also mainly for people to talk to one another and exchange ideas and do mutual problem solving. That was key. There are also structures that exist in school districts into which people who are committed to making this become part of the repertoire of their teachers can inject this material. One of them is the induction program. An induction program of a school district can say, hey, sometime in the first 3 years of your employment with us, we want you to take this course and visit somebody else who has taken it and is practicing these skills. You all put in several of the structures that your local teams, that your local school districts had done in order to make the material more accessible to them. One was a district that had a resident educator program, and so this became part of something people would study in that context. Another one was, let's see, teacher-based teams. But teacher-based teams made me think of common planning time team.
Right.
If a common planning time team has a member or two who have had this work, what they can do is add it to the way in which they plan joint lessons together. Now, it's a high-functioning team that goes as far as planning together a lesson we are all going to teach. But when you do that, one of the things to plan and making students thinking visible is the starting question you're going to use in order to provoke the talk and the interest amongst all the kids. So identifying that starting question is something that fits very well into those teams. Co-observations, in which an experienced coach from one of the buildings who's had the course goes around with the administrator and observes people who are skilled at the course, is another embedded structure which can help the administrators in the building become more tuned into what the skills are. So whenever there is a regular routine kind of event where educators gather, or which is part of the regular operating system of the district, like the teacher evaluation system, one ought to look for a way in which to embed this material. Teacher evaluation, by the way, even though this is something where we're doing the maximum amount to make it a safe, non-threatening environment for slowly accumulating more and more skills, almost everybody's evaluation systems has something about interactive student talk or equitable classroom talk in the instrument. And so that is a way to say, hey, our evaluation system is already asking people to pay attention to it. Let's highlight the fact that it's already embedded there. And these are skills that will enable people to do that better. So hats off to you all for thinking about this notion and making it part of what you talked to districts about when you invited them to join, Candi.
Thanks, John. You present us with so many good ideas in so many ways. So thank you. So now I'll turn it over to Tom.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask you about on the student side. So as we said, we're finishing up our 6th cohort. So we have many districts in our region who are implementing MSTV practices or, consciously thinking about all those operating standards that, how does this impact the students themselves? You talked a little bit about the teachers working on it, but, what have you seen? I know we could talk about it, but you've seen a lot of other areas using it. Like, how does MSTV have a positive impact on the students? Because that's what we hear a lot about, but we kind of want to hear how, from your point of view of that.
Well, one of the biggest things that we have been interested in over the decades is high expectation teaching and getting the kids to believe in themselves. MSTV is one of the prime ways to make kids feel safe about making mistakes. Mm-hmm. And to come to view mistakes as an opportunity for learning and or get support by other people in the class. The second video that we show in the online course is in that same 8th grade class as the first video, where a kid makes a mistake in front of the whole class sitting in a circle. And instead of saying, no, you're wrong, or can somebody fix his mistake, the teacher says, can you come up to the overhead and show us how you were thinking about that? And he still doesn't see his error. So he goes up there and he starts constructing tiles in order to illustrate the perimeter of a swimming pool. And he realizes his mistake. And instead of freezing, which a kid will do when humiliated or he goes ahead and he solves it. And so that is a real tangible illustration of a very important part of this. We got really interested in it because central to our work has been this question for me as a teacher: how do I create a surround sound for my students, a surround sound environment that is conveying at all times in every way 3 key messages? What we're doing is important. You can do it. You can do it. And I'm not going to give up on you. In fact, Candi, the first thing you ever invited me out to do was to join several other people you were bringing together annually for an institute that had to do with that. You know, how do we blend cultural proficiency and anti-racist teaching with getting the kids to believe in themselves and acquiring the tools to be successful students? And that's why I lit up when I was visiting District 2 and learning these skills. I saw that you needed to do this, make the environment safe in order to carry forward the things that a teacher might be doing in order to help the kids believe that they had able brains. So, you know, I had up earlier on a slide some of the outcomes for students. You see in behavior, they talk more than the teacher does. They talk at a higher level of thinking. They speak in complete sentences, not single words. But I think the big umbrella around it all is they do all that in an environment that expresses belief in their capacity to think and to be successful.
Thank you. Yeah, and I like some of the things you were saying were definitely ways to help teachers, and you know, they could take those ideas to implement those, and that advice would be very good for those that are watching us now that are currently implementing MSTV, or for those that are hopefully going to be joining us on our next cohort. Yeah, that's some great advice. And you know, you had mentioned earlier about evaluations, and you know, teacher evaluations is just a way to help us reflect and grow. What kind of advice could you give administrators in supporting teachers? Because you have mentioned, and even some of the videos in the course, that yeah, there's a little bit of a struggle to start with. It's sometimes it's, you know, teachers may know these things, but you know, being intentional. What advice could you give administrators for them to support their teachers as they implement this?
Well, the first thing I'd say is take the course yourself and participate visibly as a learner. And you know, when I was putting together this course, Lucy and I were actively working with all the instructional coaches in the city of Lowell, which is here. Now, Lucy was an expert on it. She was in a position to directly coach them, but I was still learning it. This is in the 90s. So I asked to borrow a group of kids and to try it out, and have the coaches watch me with that list of 24 things in front of them and give me feedback on which ones I got in and which ones I didn't. So I would recommend that to principals. If your teachers see you as a co-learner about something, anything, it is a tremendous boost for your relationship with them, their trust of you, because they see you as willing to be vulnerable in front of them. So take the course and learn the skills and be willing to be seen as not an expert in them yet. That's the very first thing that I would recommend. And the second thing is set up some structures so that sometimes the observations you do are just for those particular attributes or those 24 principles. The other thing I would do if I were administrator is be prepared to share the research on and the history of making students thinking visible. Now, there are many things that I have learned as a staff developer that are sobering and sometimes humiliating, you know, like research evidence doesn't convince people. Isn't that disappointing? If I want to get something to enter into the practice of a teacher because I think it's good, it certainly isn't going to do harm to present the evidence, but that won't do it. But if I put my feet in the water too, as a way of showing I think it's important, even if I'm clumsy at it, that's going to carry some weight. And you know, I learned this formula decades ago, and I've used it ever since. I can't even remember where I got it from, and I haven't been able to track it down in the literature. But if you want somebody to adopt a new practice and you think it's important, say so. Say it. The second thing in this formula is model it. Do it yourself. Practice the behavior. The third one is organize for it. Create some sort of a structure where people can learn it in common. It could be a study group of 5 teachers in your building who are interested. They take the course, they support one another, and then they become the champions for it. And then the fourth one is protect it. That is, defend from sarcasm or dissing people who are the first ones to try out something new. And that means being willing to push back if somebody says, we tried things like that before, we did it before. And the fifth one is reward it. And that means in a non-hokey way. As a teacher, I don't want to be rewarded by having my picture in the teacher's room as teacher of the month. That doesn't cut it for teachers. But if you send me to a conference where somebody is expanding on how they have used a particular practice in their own work, or you do something else that is to my professional benefit, then I like that. I accept it. And most of the rewarded things that we do for teachers are usually informal, personal, one-on-one. The last thing that we're going to get right now is a pay raise for showing that I have a new skill that I can do. There is, by the way, a school of thought 20 years ago that said that is how bonuses should be awarded to teachers, rather than the toxic practice of trying to compare value-added scores. So all of that is a kind of a long-winded answer to your question. I'm sorry.
No, but I think, a lot of the advice for administrators, they can use that in many aspects, not just, helping their teachers implement making student thinking visible, but, across the board in any type of thing going on, and for teachers to use it in their classrooms with their students. So I appreciate that advice. I think that would be very helpful. Candi, do you have anything that you want to?
So I think at this time, we're going to close it out and give you time to ask if you have any other thoughts. But Jon, you're always such an inspiration, always. Thank you so much for taking the time today to share your thoughts, research, and experience about this important work. And we also want to extend a huge thank you to you for partnering with us in this region, but also across the state of Ohio for the last 10 years. While we love and need MSTV, this is a small part of the work that you have researched and taught to help improve outcomes for all students. And anyone looking for more information on how to learn from Jon, go to rbteach.com to find resources, videos, courses, and many other learning opportunities. Jon, is it 8 books now that you are authored?
Yeah. Candi.
The Skillful Teacher and High Expectations Teaching are 2 of my favorites. And I'm not giving them up.
Anytime it's a new edition, you can all get one for free from me.
All right. Yay. But so Jon, before we really close out, is there anything you want to add or ask or anything? We are so grateful to you for doing all you have to help us.
Thanks, Candi. Well, maybe just this. Of all the things in the world to do for a living, I can't imagine anything more complicated or wide-ranging in what it demands of people than interactive classroom teaching. And I wish our voting public realized that. The people who go into our business are usually people who are idealistic and love kids and love the what we get back from kids. That's the number one thing that keeps people in teaching. And there was a woman who studied that. Catherine Devaney was her name, 1989. And she found that the second most important thing is what we get from our colleagues. In other words, learning from one another. And that is what was, I think, the key catalyst in what you all did there. You created ways for people to come together repeatedly and learn from one another. So I guess that's one thing to add to the tips for administrators, Tom. Build a school building where the adults learn as much as the kids do. Make it a learning organization. The last thing I'd add is that in this huge knowledge base about teaching, which I keep learning more about, that what keeps me going, some things are more important than others. And making students' thinking visible is a constellation of skills which is right up there at the top with important things, because it brings in so many other facets of a positive instructional environment. It brings in classroom climate, it brings in higher level thinking, it brings in student talk, and it brings in the active engagement of productive struggle with support. And finally, it brings in getting the kids to believe in themselves. So it's one of those things which you can use as a seed for branching off into other areas of learning. You know, if you get turned on to project-based learning, or you get turned on to deep learning, this is a great portal into all that other stuff. So anyway, I appreciate all you've done to make this have a foothold in your part of the state, and I hope we get a chance to start the high expectation teaching work sometime too.
Yeah.
That would be very exciting. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure, folks.
So.